The eye of terror convulsed. Across the warp, ancient entities stirred. They had seen galaxies burn, civilizations rise and fall, but this was different. Something had entered their domain, something so alien that even chaos recoiled. The crimson storms that had devoured star systems for 10,000 years shuddered. On Terra, deep within the sanctum of the Inquisition, Inquisitor Serapis stared at the tactical display. His hands trembled, the readings made no sense. Where a demon prince, vast as a battleship, had stood only moments before, there was nothing. No psychic signature, no warp disturbance, just a single human figure. "My lord," whispered Commissar Ulrich, his voice barely audible above the screaming alarms. "The target appears to be scratching his head." 3 hours earlier, that same figure had fallen from a tear in reality above the throne world itself. No weapons, no armor, civilian clothes, and a single question: directions to a grocery store. Now, Vox channels crackled with impossible reports. Entire chaos fleets vanishing, demon legions obliterated, not by sorcery, not by holy relics, not by exterminatus, but by a single punch. The being, designated Alpha-level threat, looked around with the expression of a man inconvenienced by a disrupted shopping trip. Inquisitor Serapis whispered almost to himself, "What manner of creature ends 10 millennia of war with a yawn?" Above Terra, the sky bled crimson. Warp storms raged for 17 days, an unholy aurora bathing the Imperial Palace. From the highest spires to the deepest hab blocks, 8 billion souls cowered in silence. And at the heart of it all, one unremarkable figure, wondering where the nearest store might be. Beneath skies that wept madness and whispered blasphemies older than the first breath of man, Commissar Ulrich Voss stood alone on the marble steps of the Cathedral of the Savior Emperor. The storms above bled crimson light across his weathered face. His augmetic eye whirred and focused on the tactical slate in his hand. Numbers, patterns, records of an atmosphere collapsing under the weight of the warp. 17 days. 17 days of torment. 17 days of storms that only grew worse. Astropaths screamed and clawed their own eyes out. Veterans of 100 campaigns wept blood. And still the heavens burned. Voss pressed the Aquila to his chest. The gesture drilled into his bones. His lips moved, steady, almost automatic. The Emperor protects. But even as he spoke, he felt it. The words were fragile. The faith was brittle. His conviction cracked under the weight of the storm. Behind him, the cathedral's titanic doors groaned open, metal against stone, screaming in protest. From the darkness within, a procession emerged. They wore crimson robes, their faces hidden by hoods. The Ordo Hereticus. Their arrival meant one thing: the crisis had gone beyond control. At their center strode Inquisitor Serapis. His armor gleamed with seals of purity, parchment soaked in prayers. A servo skull floated at his shoulder, casting an eerie glow over the scars that carved his face. His voice cut through the storm. "The order of the purge is in full effect." Every syllable carried the weight of 10,000 years of doctrine. 17 heretics have been cleansed this day. Their corruption shall not spread. Voss gave a single nod. He understood. It was necessary work, but it felt like emptying an ocean with a thimble. Because this storm was not only wind and fire, it carried more than lightning. It carried whispers, whispers of change, whispers of hope. And hope is the greatest heresy of all. In the Imperium of man there is no hope. There is only service. There is only obedience. There is only the Emperor's will. Hope is a virus. Hope is a cancer, and cancers must be burned. The Inquisitor raised his hand. Torches flared. Robes swept the ground as the procession marched into the storm. Their chants rose above the thunder, words of purity spoken against the impossible. But Voss lingered. He stared into the skies as they tore themselves apart. And in the silence of his own heart, the Commissar knew a truth he would never speak. The purge was not enough. The storms would not end. And no amount of fire, no number of dead would hold back what was coming, because the warp had shifted, and something had stepped through. The panic spread through the populace like wildfire. In the distance, the colossal spires of the imperial palace pierced the storming clouds. Their adamantium peaks bristled with defensive batteries, weapons powerful enough to shatter entire fleets. But even those titanic guns seemed fragile against the horror twisting in the skies. The air itself turned sour. It reeked of ozone and something else, something alive, something wrong. It crawled across Ulrich's skin despite his decades of service. Beside him, Inquisitor Sarapus spoke. His implants glowed faintly in the crimson stormlight. The astropaths report instability in the warp currents, he said, voice steady, heavy. We may need to. The sky tore open. Not gradually, not with warning, but with the sudden violence of reality ripped apart like parchment. A wound appeared, clean and circular, 50 meters wide. From it poured not light, but absolute darkness. Every alarm in the sector screamed. Palace void shields flickered, then died. The servo skull at Sarapus's shoulder dropped like a stone, its machine spirit overwhelmed by the impossible. In the streets below, billions fell to their knees. Some prayed, others wailed in madness. Ulrich's augmentic eye sparked, then failed, but his remaining vision was enough. He saw what came next. A single figure, humanoid, falling through the torn sky with the careless motion of a man who had simply tripped. The figure tumbled from the wound in the sky like a man who had tripped down a flight of stairs. He wore civilian clothing, a bright yellow hooded garment, matching pants, rubber sandals. No armor, no weapons, no sigils of allegiance. An ordinary-looking human male, bald, his face calm, showing only mild confusion, visible even from the heights of the cathedral steps. Then he struck. The impact shook the marble plaza like the hammer of a god. The stone cracked in every direction. 50 meters of devastation spread from the point of impact. Marble that had endured 10 millennia of imperial glory shattered like glass. The shock wave tore dust and debris from the surrounding structures. The very foundations groaned. Civilians screamed and pressed their faces to the ground. And yet, when the dust cleared, the figure simply stood, He brushed rubble from his yellow clothing with the casual air of a man annoyed by dirt on his laundry. Silence followed. 3 long heartbeats, where time itself seemed to hesitate. Then sound returned. The bells of the cathedral tolled, alarms blared across the district. From shadowed alcoves and hidden gates, the guardians of the Emperor appeared, the Adeptus Custodes. 10,000 years of loyalty and war. Their auramite armor glowed even in the poisoned stormlight. Guardian spears crackled with power fields, ready to annihilate gods. The stranger's eyes swept across them. He saw the Custodes. He saw the Inquisition. He saw the billions prostrate in terror, clinging to faith like drowning men to driftwood. And then he spoke. His voice was calm, clear, conversational, yet it carried across the plaza as if the stones themselves bore his words. Excuse me, he said. Is this city Z?
Commander Valoran, veteran of wars that spanned millennia, raised his guardian spear. The weapon hummed with restrained fury, its Grasheen spirit eager to taste the blood of the Emperor's enemies. Around him, his brother custodians moved as one, a circle of gold and death, each step precise, each gesture inevitable. Valoran's voice thundered through his vox.
In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself. State your allegiance. State your purpose upon the most sacred soil of Terra. The figure tilted his head. He scratched the smooth dome of his skull as if the question itself was too heavy to bother with. Sorry, I think I got lost again. I was trying to get to the grocery store. Saturday sale. Cabbage marked down to 98 yen a head. Do you know if there's a supermarket nearby? The silence that followed was unbearable. It pressed down upon the plaza, heavier than the storm itself. Even the Custodes faltered, their discipline stretched to breaking. It was Inquisitor Sarapus who moved first. He stepped forward, power sword still sheathed, though his hand rested upon the hilt with purpose. His scarred eye burned with suspicion, the kind of suspicion honed across centuries of rooting out heresy, witchcraft, and worse. The stranger blinked. His expression did not change. Ruinous what? The stranger lifted his hand slightly. His tone remained calm. Look, I just need directions. I was walking to the store, then there was this swirling thing in the sky. Next thing I knew, I was falling, and now I'm here. He gestured at the shattered plaza, the crater, the ruin. Sorry about the mess. That happens sometimes when I land. In the sea of prostrate civilians, whispers spread like ripples through poisoned water. An old woman, bent from decades in the manufactoria, lifted her head. For the first time in her life, she dared to look upon something impossible. Her eyes widened, trembling. "A saint," she whispered. "The Emperor has sent us. A saint." The word traveled like fire across the masses. From mouth to mouth, faith twisted into frenzy. A saint, a savior, deliverance from 17 days of storms and suffering. The crowd stirred. Some lifted their faces, hope burning through fear. Others pressed themselves deeper against the marble, desperate for benediction from holy ground. Commander Valoran's tactical systems screamed inside his mind. Threat level unknown. Classification impossible. Recommended action immediate termination. Yet he hesitated. Not from weakness, not from fear, but because this thing radiated no malice, no hate, no corruption. only confusion. Still, his voice thundered through the plaza. "You will submit to examination, or face the consequences of defying the Adeptus Custodes upon Terra itself." The stranger looked around slowly, at the giants of gold encircling him, at the Inquisition forces with weapons ready, at the civilians whispering, praying, trembling at his feet. Then he sighed.
The stranger's expression never changed. Mild bewilderment, as if he had wandered into someone else's surprise party and didn't know the proper etiquette. "Okay," he said at last. "But after that, could someone point me toward a grocery store? I really do need those vegetables." Commissar Ulrich swallowed hard. His organic eye darted from the impossible figure to the data slate in his hands. The device flickered, failing to reconcile the readings it had captured. Still, he began typing, his fingers trembling. Report draft. Subject, unknown humanoid entity. Arrival, warp breach above the Palace District. Threat, pending. Initial observations. Subject claims to be lost civilian. Objective appears to be acquisition of food goods. Impact force, equivalent to orbital bombardment. Despite this, subject displays no injuries, no visible weapons, no immediate hostility. Recommendation, consult Ordo Malleus immediately. As the commissar transmitted the report, he could not escape the sensation clawing at the back of his mind. This man, this bald, unarmed, bewildered man, had already altered the course of human history. For salvation or damnation, no one could yet say. Above, the warp storms raged on, their sickly light drenching the palace spires. Yet something in their fury shifted. The storms no longer pressed with such weight, no longer screamed quite so loud. It was as if even the dark gods themselves held their breath. And at the center of the plaza, the stranger stood quietly, looking left, looking right, waiting. His face calm, patient, as though all he wanted was someone to tell him where the nearest shopping center was. The guardian spear in Commander Valeron's hands hummed with caged violence. The machine spirit howled for blood. The custodian's duty demanded action. The choice was his. The plaza held its breath. Valeron raised his weapon, the guardian spear trembling with the restrained fury of its machine spirit. Around him, 11 of the Emperor's finest moved as one, golden titans of war forming a flawless circle of execution. Their formation was more than discipline, it was ritual. 10 millennia of training had perfected every motion, every breath. Each custodian was not a man. Each was a weapon, the Emperor's weapon. "Final warning!" Valeron's voice thundered, vox grills amplifying his words into a cathedral of iron. "Submit to imperial authority or face immediate termination." The figure in yellow, bald and unarmed, simply looked around. His gaze wandered like a child in a museum, pausing at the ornate armor, the purity seals fluttering in the charged wind, the skull-faced servo-skulls hovering above like vultures of bone and steel. Then, in a voice so casual it seemed blasphemous, he asked, "Is this some kind of costume party? The armor's impressive. Must have cost a fortune." The words dropped like acid into silence. That sealed it. Demon, xenos, heretic, something worse. Whatever this intruder was, it dared to mock the Custodes, dared to make light of the Emperor's guardians. Valeron's instincts, sharpened by centuries of slaughter in the Emperor's name, made the decision for him. Open fire.
12 guardian spears discharged in perfect unison. Beams of annihilation converged, reality itself ionizing as the air turned white-hot. The blast screamed like thunder compressed into a blade, tearing shadows across marble, shattering windows 3 blocks away. Civilians covered their ears, some dropping unconscious from the sheer pressure of sound. And then, silence. When the ozone stench drifted away and the smoke curled into dying wisps, the stranger was still there, standing in the center of the circle. Untouched, unharmed. His expression hadn't changed, just mild, polite confusion, as if nothing had happened.
Apparently unharmed.
The figure's yellow garment was untouched. His skin bore no burns. He hadn't even blinked. "Huh," the man said, patting his chest where 12 guardian spears had struck him. "That felt kind of warm, like a really mild sun lamp." Valoran's tactical assessment systems faltered, then rebooted, then crashed again 3 times in rapid succession. This was impossible. Guardian spears weren't weapons of intimidation. They were extinction engines, tools designed to punch through Chaos Terminator armor, to atomize demons, to collapse fortresses that had endured the bombardments of the Horus Heresy itself. And this bald figure in sandals had endured them without flinching? "Increase power to maximum," Valoran ordered, his voice steady, masking the fracture lines of doubt spiderwebbing through his mind. "Full dispersal pattern." The custodians obeyed without hesitation. The second volley was not precision, it was annihilation. Energy fields overlapped, reinforced, magnified, until the entire plaza became a storm of incandescent destruction. The ground shook, statues shattered, entire sections of marble melted and ran like wax beneath the fury of mankind's greatest warriors. A space marine would have been vaporized, a demon prince reduced to ash. Nothing could survive. Nothing should survive. And when the light finally died, the figure was still standing, still brushing dust from his clothes, still looking faintly annoyed. "You guys sure use a lot of special effects. Are you filming something? I don't see any cameras around." A ripple of unease spread through the ranks of soldiers, civilians, even custodians. Inquisitor Serapis stepped forward, his scarred face a mask of discipline stretched thin over disbelief. His bionic eye whirred, cycling through auger spectrums, aspect scans, every forbidden detection mode he possessed. He found nothing. No warp signature, no psychic taint, no armor, no shielding, no explanation. And that was worse than finding everything. Inquisitor Serapis raised his scarred hand. His voice cut through the ringing silence. "Enough. Forestall another attack," Serapis commanded, his voice like iron wrapped in fire. "Stand down, Custodian Commander. We are dealing with something beyond conventional response." Valoran's gauntleted hands clenched on his spear, but he obeyed. Even the Emperor's golden guardians could not ignore the Inquisition. Around the plaza, civilians whispered frantic prayers. Terror gave way to awe. Awe bled into faith. What they saw was either salvation or damnation. Serapis advanced, his footsteps deliberate. Each one struck like judgment. His scarred face studied the bald stranger with suspicion that cut deeper than any blade. "You claim to seek directions," the Inquisitor said, his voice carrying across the ruined square. "Yet you survived weapons consecrated by the Emperor. No mortal endures that. You are either no man, or you are protected by powers beyond this realm." The figure scratched his head again, calm as ever. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm Sidama. I'm a hero for fun. And right now, I'm trying to get to the Saturday sale at the grocery store. He looked around at the spears, the Inquisition, the billions watching from Vox relays. His tone even shifted to concern. Are you guys okay? You seem really stressed out about something. Serapis repeated the name slowly, testing the sound like it might burn him. Sai-ta-ma. Alien. Impossible. No match in any imperial archive. You claim heroism as profession, yet you serve no recognized organization. That suggests heresy, or worse, xenos influence. Saitama blinked. His tone was simple, flat, almost bored. Imperium? Never heard of it. Is that like a corporation or something? The silence that followed hit harder than any weapon. Custodians stiffened, their spears tightening in unison. Civilians gasped, and Serapis's one remaining human eye narrowed with a fury born of centuries. The man before him had shrugged off the Emperor's might, and now he mocked the very existence of the Imperium. The silence that followed was not natural. It was suffocating. It was so profound it felt as though the air itself had been drained of sound. Every living soul in that plaza, custodians, Inquisition, civilians, processed the same unthinkable truth. This man had never heard of the Imperium of man. It was like claiming ignorance of the stars, or gravity, or death itself. "Impossible," Commissar Ulrich whispered, his voice cracked by disbelief. His data slate slipped from his trembling hands. "Every human knows the Emperor's dominion. Every human soul." The bald figure shrugged. A casual, dismissive motion. A gesture so ordinary it became terrifying. "Sorry, but I've never heard of any emperor. I'm from City Z. We just have a mayor and a city council. Pretty boring, honestly." The words echoed like heresy. The very stones of the plaza seemed to recoil. Serapis felt it then, that familiar chill, the razor edge of something that refused to be categorized. He had faced daemons cloaked in flesh, xenos parasites that mimicked human form, cultists so broken they forgot they were human. But this was different. Either the most sophisticated infiltrator ever conceived, or something else entirely. Serapis drew his weapon, his power sword hissed to life, its field humming with lethal purpose. The glow painted his scarred face in pale fire. "You will submit to examination," he said, each word struck like a verdict. "Compliance is not optional." "Okay," Saitama replied, without hesitation, his tone maddeningly agreeable. "But could we maybe do it somewhere with less pointing and shouting? You all seem really upset, and I honestly haven't done anything wrong." Then he moved, a step forward, ordinary, unthreatening. But his sandal caught on a jagged stone from the crater his landing had carved. He stumbled. Reflexively, he reached out, and his hand brushed against the custodian's spear.
Saitama stumbled forward and reached for balance. His hand closed around the nearest solid object. It wasn't a railing. It wasn't debris. It was the corner of a titanous defensive wall, a sanctified bulwark that had stood unbroken for 6,000 years, forged from adamantium and ceramite, reinforced with blessed oils and prayers, studded with the relics of saints, etched with victories of heroes. A wall that had turned back xenos hordes, heretic war machines, even the unholy touch of daemons. It crumbled in his hand, like dry sand.
17 meters of fortification collapsed into nothingness. The ancient rampart vanished, leaving a ragged void wide enough for a land raider to pass through. Sidama blinked, looked down at the dust in his palm, then at the gaping wound in Terra's most sacred defenses. "Oops." His voice was soft, almost sheepish. "Sorry about that. I'm still, getting used to this whole thing." The reaction was immediate and absolute. Every gun emplacement in the plaza rotated toward him. Every custodian leveled their guardian spears. Every servo skull shrieked alarms. Alert klaxons wailed across the palace district. The Senatorium Imperialis locked down. Deep within the labyrinthine vaults of the throne, cogitators spun to life, churning probabilities, calculating tactical scenarios. The numbers returned were unthinkable. One conclusion emerged again and again. This being, by accident alone, had displayed strength rivaling the Primarchs themselves. Inquisitor Serapis felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. This was no infiltrator, no xenos masquerade, no heretic trick. This was an alpha-level threat. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of galaxies. "Initiate containment protocols. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt termination at this time." Oblivious to the storm he had unleashed, Sidama dusted his hands off on his cape, then looked around the plaza, eyes wide with awkward concern. "So, does anyone know where the grocery store is?" Sidama turned the powdered remains of Terra's holy wall between his fingers. To him, it was nothing more than dust. To the Imperium, it was a miracle undone, 6,000 years of sanctity and strength reduced to nothing in an instant. "That's weird," he mused aloud. "Usually things are tougher than that. Maybe the construction quality isn't very good around here." He raised his eyes toward the circle of trembling weapons, smiling with that same casual politeness. "So, about those directions to the grocery store?" No one answered. No one could. Commissar Alret's hands shook as he typed, every keystroke weighted with dread. Subject: demonstrates casual destruction capabilities beyond current threat assessment parameters. Recommendation: immediate consultation with highest available authorities. Closing note: the throne preserve us all. The words were dry, clinical, but every soul in the plaza knew the truth. Mankind had just crossed into uncharted territory. Beyond the palace, the warp storms writhed and clawed at reality, their eldritch fury shaking entire sectors. And yet they seemed lesser now, insignificant. For what was a storm compared to a man who could undo the defenses of Terra with a careless hand? A man who asked only for vegetables. And there he stood, Sidama, calm, patient, the most dangerous being in the history of mankind, waiting for directions. Beneath the imperial palace, the war council gathered in haste, a convocation of the Imperium's greatest powers, lords, generals, inquisitors, assembled beneath vaulted ceilings of black stone. They argued, whispered, calculated. 17 minutes. That was all it took to shatter doctrines older than empires. 17 minutes. to decide the fate of humanity. Inquisitor Serapis stood before a hololithic display, the crimson light of burning worlds spilling across his scarred face. Data flickered, systems in chaos, sectors collapsing under the weight of war. But all of it, every siege, every heresy, every looming shadow of chaos, was eclipsed by one new variable, one man, one impossibility, one Sidama.
The High Lords of Terra listened in silence. Inquisitor Serapis's words fell like thunder across the chamber. Termination appears impossible. Therefore, I propose redirection, a tactical application. The chamber stirred, ancient robes rustling, augmetic eyes flickering. For millennia, the Imperium had bent every anomaly to its war machine. Perhaps even this impossibility could serve. Then came the voice, cold, commanding, broadcast across light years. Lord Commander Robute Guilliman himself, speaking from the fortress world of Macragge. Explain, Inquisitor. Serapis turned to the hololithic display. Red sigils bled across the mat of the Segmentum Obscurus. Mordian 7th, under chaos siege for 43 days, millions trapped, relief forces broken. He raised a scarred hand. If this Sidama can accidentally reduce Terra's fortifications to dust, perhaps he can intentionally reduce the enemy to ruin. The chamber froze. 37 seconds of silence. 37 seconds in which history held its breath. Then came the voice, cold, commanding, broadcast across light years. Lord Commander Robute Guilliman himself, speaking from the fortress world of Macragge. Do it, Inquisitor, but maintain full monitoring protocols. If the entity shows signs of corruption or hostility, you are authorized to deploy exterminatus. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Understood, my lord. The journey through the void revealed much and explained nothing. The being called Sidama spoke with childlike curiosity, yet his words pierced like blades into the mysteries of the mechanicum. So you're saying this whole ship travels through a dimension where emotions and thoughts become real? The commissar froze. Even seasoned captains feared to speak so plainly of the immaterium. But Sidama? He said it as casually as one might ask about the weather. What happens if someone has a nightmare while you're traveling? Ulrich swallowed hard. His data slate shook in his hand. The entity had just described warp travel with a clarity that tech priests themselves often failed to articulate. The Geller field protects us from such manifestations, he replied, voice low, rehearsed. Sidama's eyes widened, impressed. Huh, like a psychic barrier. That's pretty smart. The people who built this stuff must be really good engineers. Ulrich forced the only answer his training would allow. The Emperor protects. But in the silence that followed, a darker truth gnawed at him. Whatever shielded this man in yellow was stronger than any Geller field.
The dropship, Emperor's Wrath, cut through the storm. Its descent was a spear thrown into the heart of a dying world. Anti-air fire clawed at the sky, each blast close enough to shake the ship's armored frame. Veteran soldiers gritted their teeth against the turbulence, knuckles white on their restraints. Sidama tilted his bald head. Is this normal for public transportation here? The question, so casual, so absurd, hung in the smoke-filled cabin. Inquisitor Serapis muttered through clenched teeth. Nothing about this situation is normal. Landing zone, Hive Mordian. The city was gone. What remained was a nightmare made flesh. Streets that writhed like veins, towers that groaned and grew teeth. Every breath tasted of blood and rust. The 47th Mordian Iron Guard held what ground they could. Exhaustion painted every line of Colonel Castor's scarred face as he saluted, his augmetic arm whining with strain. Inquisitor, the enemy has breached our outer defenses. We give it 2 hours before the line collapses. Serapis's face hardened. His voice was iron. Show me the tactical situation. The colonel unrolled a battered map across a makeshift table, his finger tracing the thin red lines that marked the last bastion of resistance. But while men planned war, the stranger in yellow wandered. Sidama tilted away from the table, his eyes not on the enemy positions, not on the lines of retreat. Instead, he peered into the ruined husks of shops, once markets, once homes, now twisted into mockeries by the touch of the warp. He paused in front of a shattered storefront, its sign still clinging to the last vestiges of what it had once been. A grocery. The hero for fun smiled faintly. Finally,